The stars vanished one by one as the barrier closed around Earth's solar system. Captain John Miller watched from the observation deck of the Earth Coalition ship Horizon as humanity's access to the galaxy was sealed off. His hands trembled slightly as he drank from his cup. It was his actions that led to this moment. A diplomatic mission to the Xyrillian Empire had gone terribly wrong. What started as a misunderstanding about resource rights in a disputed system had escalated when John made the call to defend a human colony under attack. The Xyrillians claimed it was their territory. The Galactic Council sided with them. "Captain, they're requesting your presence at the emergency broadcast," said a young officer from the doorway. John nodded and followed him to the communications room. Screens displayed the final session of the Galactic Council where humanity's fate had been decided. Councillor Vexnar of the Xyrillians stood tall, his blue-scaled skin gleaming under the council lights. "The human species has proven itself too unpredictable and dangerous to remain part of our galactic community," Vexnar said. "Their actions in the Proxima dispute demonstrate their violent tendencies and disregard for established order. I move for complete quarantine." The vote was displayed on screen, 10 in favor, 2 against. Humanity was to be confined to their solar system indefinitely. The barrier would prevent any ship from leaving. No communications would be allowed to pass through. Dr. Lisa Grant stood in her laboratory at Luna Base, watching the same broadcast. She had been studying alien technologies for 15 years. Now her work seemed pointless. She turned off the screen and looked at her equations on the whiteboard. Phase shifting was just theoretical, but maybe, just maybe, it could be the key to eventually bypassing the barrier. "They can't just trap us here," her assistant said. "What about our colonies beyond Sol?" "Evacuations are already underway," Lisa replied. "The Council is giving our people 1 month to return home before the barrier is complete." Back on Earth, chaos erupted as the news spread. Stock markets crashed. Governments held emergency sessions. Food riots broke out in major cities as people feared resource shortages without access to the colony worlds. The Earth Coalition crumbled. Under the pressure, unable to maintain order across the planet, Alan Foster was only 7 years old when the barrier went up. He stood with his father on a hill outside their rural home, watching the night sky. "Why did they lock us in, Dad?" he asked. His father knelt beside him. "They're afraid of us, Alan, afraid of what we might become. Will we ever get out? Someday. And when we do, they'll see exactly what humans are capable of." Alan never forgot that conversation. As he grew older, he watched humanity change. The first 5 years were the hardest. Nations fought over remaining resources. 3 small wars broke out. Millions died from conflict and starvation, but then something unexpected happened. A common enemy united the fractured planet. 10 years. After the exile, the first Solar Congress was formed. Representatives from all nations met to pool resources and knowledge. The goal was simple: survive, grow stronger, and one day break free. 20 years after exile, the first habitats were built in Earth orbit. Massive rotating structures housed thousands of people, growing food in hydroponic gardens and manufacturing goods in zero-gravity factories. Mining operations on the Moon expanded. The first permanent Mars colony was established. Dr. Lisa Grant led the research division developing new technologies. Without alien trade, humans had to innovate on their own. Her team focused on the barrier itself, sending probes to study its properties. The first 3 probes were destroyed on contact. The 4th managed to send back data for nearly 30 seconds before it too was obliterated. "It's not just an energy field," Lisa explained to the Solar Congress. "It's programmed to adapt to any attempt to breach it. But everything has a weakness. We just need to find it." Captain John Miller never recovered from his role in humanity's exile. He resigned his commission and lived alone in a small apartment in what was once called New Zealand. When a group of angry civilians discovered his identity, they broke in and beat him severely. He died from his injuries, never seeing the transformation his actions had inadvertently triggered. 50 years after exile, the Solar Imperium was officially formed. No longer a loose Congress of Nations, but a unified government for all humans. whether they lived on Earth, Mars, the Moon, or the growing number of space habitats throughout the system. Resources from the asteroid belt provided metals. Gases were harvested from the outer planets. Humanity expanded throughout their prison, building and growing. Alan Foster, now in his 50s, served as a representative on the Imperium Council. He championed the military expansion program, arguing that when humanity finally broke free, they needed to be ready for whatever awaited them. "We must assume the worst," he told the council. "That the races who exiled us are still out there and still consider us a threat. We must be prepared not just to escape, but to defend ourselves." The Solar Imperium fleet grew. Ships trained in the space between planets, new weapons were developed. Children were taught about the stars they couldn't visit, the aliens who had rejected their ancestors, and the destiny that awaited them when they finally broke free. 75 years after exile, a breakthrough came. Dr. Lisa Grant, now in her final years, led a team that included brilliant physicist William Carter. They discovered unusual properties in particles found in Saturn's rings. When properly refined, these particles exhibited phase-shifting capabilities that might allow matter to briefly exist out of sync with normal space. In theory, William explained to the Imperium Council, a ship coated with this material and powered by the right energy source could temporarily shift just enough to pass through the barrier. Lisa didn't live to see her work completed. She died knowing that she had given humanity its first real hope of freedom. William Carter continued her research, refining the process, testing with larger and larger objects 100 years after exile. The first test of a small unmanned probe was successful. It passed through the barrier and transmitted data from the other side for nearly an hour before losing power. The images it sent back showed the stars beyond their prison. The Imperium celebrated this small victory, knowing that true freedom was still years away. Alan Foster, now an old man, watched the celebration from his hospital bed. His son brought him a small vial containing a piece of the probe that had made it through. "We'll be ready soon, Dad," his son said. "The fleet is almost complete. The phase shift technology is being adapted for larger vessels." Alan held the vial and smiled. "I won't see it, but you will. When you get out there, remember why we do this? Not just for revenge, but to take our rightful place. We've grown stronger in here than we ever would have out there. When humanity returns to the galaxy, it will be as an empire." William Carter stood at the viewport of the research station orbiting Saturn. Below him, collection vessels scooped up ring particles, containing the rare element that had become the most valuable substance in the solar system. 100 years had passed since the barrier went up. William had dedicated his life to continuing Dr. Lisa Grant's work on phase shift technology. The unmanned probe's success was just the beginning. Now they needed to scale up the technology for larger vessels. "The latest refinement process has increased efficiency by 28%, said his assistant, showing him data on a tablet. "We can coat a ship the size of a small fighter now." William nodded. "Schedule a meeting with Admiral Hayes. It's time for a manned test." The Solar Imperium had changed dramatically over the century of isolation. Where once there had been nations, now there was a single government spanning the entire solar system. Massive space habitats orbited every planet. Mining operations extracted resources from the asteroid belt. Terraforming efforts on Mars had created areas where humans could walk with only breathing masks. The population had grown to 15 billion, with only 4 billion remaining on Earth itself. Admiral Susan Hayes received William's message while inspecting the Neptune Defense Station. The Imperium maintained military outposts throughout the system, training for the day they would break free. Susan had risen through the ranks quickly, known for her tactical genius and unwavering discipline. At 45, she commanded the largest division of the Imperium fleet. "A manned test flight through the barrier," she said, reading the report. "We need our best pilot for this." Kyle Bennett was eating lunch in the pilot's lounge at Titan Base when he received the summons. At 32, he had already set records in the flight simulator and led the elite Phantom Squadron on training missions throughout the outer system. His fellow pilots fell silent as he read the message. They're tapping you for something big. His wingman guessed. Kyle nodded, trying to hide his excitement. Looks that way. Have to report to Admiral Hayes immediately. 2 weeks later, Kyle stood before a small gathered crowd in a high-security hangar. The test vessel gleamed with an iridescent coating of the phase shift material. It was small, just large enough for one pilot and basic life support systems. Kyle had spent the past 14 days training in the simulator, learning how to activate the phase shift drive and navigate during the brief window it would provide. Admiral Hayes addressed the assembled scientists and military personnel. Today marks a historic moment for the Imperium. For a century, we have been prisoners in our own solar system. If successful, this test will prove that we can break free of our cage. Director Patricia Lawson watched from the back of the room. As head of the Imperium Intelligence Bureau, she was already planning for what would come after. Her agents had been training for decades, learning languages and customs of alien species from records that predated the exile. Once the barrier was breached, they would be the first to infiltrate and gather intelligence on what awaited humanity. The phase shift will last approximately 90 seconds, William Carter explained to Kyle as they did the final pre-flight check. That should be enough time to pass through the barrier and transmit data back. Then activate the return sequence. Immediately, Kyle nodded. What happens if the shift fails while I'm passing through? William hesitated. The simulations suggest immediate disintegration. So don't fail. Got it. The small ship launched from the hangar, accelerating toward the edge of the solar system. The barrier wasn't visible until you got close. From a distance, it looked like the stars simply stopped, leaving a perfect sphere of blackness around the solar system. As Kyle approached, the barrier shimmered into view, a faint blue energy field stretching in all directions. Control, I'm in position, Kyle reported, preparing to activate phase shift drive. In the control room, William and Admiral Hayes watched tensely. The phase shift technology was still experimental. The unmanned probe had succeeded, but a human pilot was different. The ship's systems had to maintain life support during the shift. Drive activated, Kyle's voice came through with static. Beginning approach. The ship's exterior began to shimmer as the phase shift took effect. The particles in the special coating vibrated at frequencies that pushed the ship slightly out of normal space. On the monitors, the vessel appeared partially transparent. Barrier contact in 3, 2, 1. The ship touched the blue energy field. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the vessel began to pass through, like a ghost moving through a wall. Everyone in the control room held their breath. I'm through. Kyle's excited voice crackled through the communications system. Repeat, I'm through the barrier. Stars are visible in all directions. No sign of patrol ships or monitoring systems. William let out a whoop of joy. Admiral Hayes allowed herself a small smile. Director Lawson immediately began making notes. Transmitting. Data now, Kyle continued. Phase shift stable at 62%. 40 seconds remaining before shift collapses. The data flowed in, confirming what they had hoped. The barrier could be breached. Freedom was possible. Beginning return sequence, Kyle reported. Rotating 180 degrees, preparing for second barrier contact. The tension rose again as they watched Kyle's ship approach the barrier from the outside. This would be the true test. If the ship could pass back through, it would prove the technology worked in both directions. Barrier contact in 3, 2, 1. Static filled the communication channel. Long seconds passed. William gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. Control, this is Bennett. Kyle's voice finally came through. I am back inside the system. Phase shift drive is offline, but all other systems functional. Mission successful. Cheers erupted throughout the control room. Admiral Hayes immediately began issuing orders for the next phase of testing. William Carter sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the success of his life's work. Director Lawson slipped away to begin her preparations. 3 months later, a larger vessel successfully made the journey through the barrier and back. 6 months after that, a ship the size of a small frigate repeated the feat, carrying a crew of 5. The Solar Imperium moved into high gear, constructing a fleet of vessels equipped with phase shift technology. Admiral Hayes oversaw the training of crews for the first expedition beyond the barrier. "We won't go in with guns blazing," she told her officers. "First we observe. We learn what's changed in the galaxy during our absence. Director Lawson's intelligence teams will gather information. Then we decide how humanity returns to the stars." Commander Daniel Wright was selected to lead the first expedition. His mission would be reconnaissance only. Take a small stealth fleet through the barrier, observe the state of the galaxy, and return with information. Wright had studied historical records of alien civilizations obsessively, preparing for this moment his entire career. "We don't know what's out there anymore," Wright told his crew during their final briefing. "The galaxy we knew is 150 years in the past. Civilizations rise and fall in that time. Be prepared for anything." As the expedition prepared to depart, Alan Foster's son, now an elderly statesman himself, addressed the Solar Congress. "My father didn't live to see this day, but he believed it would come. Humanity has transformed itself during our exile. We are no longer the scattered, divided species that was cast out. We return to the stars as the Solar Imperium, united and strong. The galaxy will soon remember why they feared us." Commander Daniel Wright stood on the bridge of the stealth vessel Shadow as it passed through the barrier. The ship shimmered as the phase shift drive engaged, pushing them slightly out of sync with normal space. 150 years of exile were about to end. Behind the Shadow, 5 other ships followed in tight formation, their hulls gleaming with the same iridescent coating. All were designed for stealth, with sensor-absorbing materials and minimal energy signatures. "Barrier breach complete," reported the pilot. All ships through successfully. Daniel took a deep breath. The stars looked the same, but everything else had changed. A century and a half had passed since any human had freely traveled these spaces. His mission was clear: gather intelligence, assess the current state of the galaxy, and report back to the Solar Imperium. "Maintain stealth protocols," Daniel ordered. "Set course for the Arcturus system." It was a neutral trading hub before the exile. Let's see if it still exists. The small fleet moved silently through space, their advanced engines leaving minimal traces. The Solar Imperium had developed technologies at an astonishing pace during their isolation, driven by the unified purpose of eventual return. The ships now crossing the stars were more advanced than anything humanity had possessed before the exile. "Commander, we're picking up transmission signals," said Eric Morgan, the communications specialist. "Various frequencies, multiple languages. Some I recognize from the old databases, others are new." "Record everything," Daniel instructed. "We need to update our language banks." After 3 days of travel, they reached the Arcturus system. The sight that greeted them was unexpected. Where once a thriving trade hub had existed, now a militarized zone stood. Warships bearing unfamiliar designs patrolled the area. The space station at the center of the system had been expanded, with weapon emplacements visible along its hull. "Xerillian vessels detected," reported the sensor officer, comparing the ships to historical records. "But their design has evolved significantly," Daniel frowned. The Xerillians had been the leading voice for humanity's exile. Their presence here, in what had been neutral space, suggested major political changes. "What about council ships?" Daniel asked. The Galactic Council had once maintained peacekeeping vessels in all major systems. "None detected, sir. Only Xerillian and what appear to be subjugated species vessels. The implications were troubling." Had the Xerillians expanded their influence? What had happened to the Galactic Council that had banished humanity? "We need more information," Daniel decided. Set course for the Proxima system. It was near Council space. As they traveled, they intercepted more communications. Eric worked tirelessly to translate the new dialects and piece together what had happened during humanity's absence. "Sir, from what I can gather, the Galactic Council fractured about 60 years ago," Eric reported after 2 weeks of signal analysis. "The Xerillians have conquered 4 other council races and established what they call the Xerillian Empire. The remaining council members are fighting a losing war. Nancy Reynolds, the fleet's intelligence officer, reviewed the data. We need direct infiltration. Intercepted communications only tell us so much, Daniel nodded. We'll stop at the Centauri waypoint. It was a minor outpost, less likely to be heavily guarded. Nancy, prepare for infiltration. The Centauri waypoint had changed as well. Once a small refueling station, it had grown into a significant outpost. Fortunately, it wasn't a military installation, but a trading post serving multiple species. The stealth fleet hid in the shadow of a moon while Nancy prepared for her mission. The translator implant should handle most common languages, William explained as he checked her equipment. Your cover identity is as a trader from the outer systems. The genetic masking will hide your human DNA if you're scanned. Nancy nodded. She had trained for this mission her entire life, studying alien behaviors and customs from historical records. Now she would be the first human to walk among aliens in 150 years. A small shuttle took her to the station. Heart-pounding, she joined the flow of various alien species entering the waypoint. Her altered appearance and forged credentials passed inspection. Soon she was walking through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Over the next 3 days, Nancy gathered crucial intelligence. She accessed public data terminals, eavesdropped on conversations, and observed the interactions between species. She noted which races were treated as equals and which as servants. The Xerelians were clearly the dominant power, their representatives. Moving with the confidence of conquerors. On the 4th day, she overheard something that changed everything. 2 aliens from a species she recognized as Arcadians were discussing a recent Xerelian defeat. The defense at Rigel cannot hold much longer, one said. Without council reinforcements, they will fall like the others. There are rumors, the other replied, lowering their voice, that Councilor Zalara is seeking outside help. What help could exist outside the known systems? Nancy moved away before they noticed her interest. This was vital information. The remaining council members were desperate, looking for any allies against Xerelian expansion. When Nancy returned to the shadow, she immediately reported her findings to Commander Wright. The galaxy has changed dramatically, sir. The Xerelians have become the very thing they accused humans of being: aggressive expansionists. The remaining council races are losing a war of attrition. Daniel considered this information carefully. Their weakness could be our opportunity. Not for revenge, but for a strategic return. Eric Morgan continued to monitor communications. During a routine scan, he intercepted an encrypted Xerelian transmission. After 3 days of work, he managed to decode it. Commander, you need to see this, Eric said, displaying the decoded message. It's a tactical overview of the Xerelian fleet deployments. They're preparing for a major offensive against the last council stronghold. Daniel studied the information. The Xerelian battle tactics were straightforward, overwhelming force applied to key strategic points. But their supply lines were extended, and their conquered territories required significant resources to control. They have weaknesses, Daniel noted. Their expansion has left them vulnerable in multiple sectors. The stealth fleet continued its reconnaissance mission, gathering more intelligence about the changed galaxy. They visited systems that had once been under council protection, now bearing the marks of Xerelian conquest. They observed the brutal efficiency with which the Xerelians controlled their new empire. 2 months into their mission, they detected a distress signal from a small system near what had once been council space. Daniel made the decision to investigate. Maintaining stealth protocols, they found a council diplomatic vessel under attack by Xerelian cruisers. The council ship was heavily damaged, its engines failing. We should remain hidden, his second-in-command advised. Our orders are to observe only. Daniel watched the one-sided battle. The council ship had been a voice for humanity's exile, but its destruction would mean the loss of potential allies against the Xerelians. Prepare weapons, Daniel ordered. We're going to intervene. Sir, our orders have changed based on new information. The Imperium needs allies, not just intelligence. Target the Xerilian vessels, minimal energy signatures until we're in range. The Shadow and its sister ships moved into position. They had remained undetected by both the Council, vessel, and its attackers. When they opened fire, their advanced weapons tore through the Xerilian shields with ease. The surprised Xerilian ships attempted to respond, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto the phase-shifted human vessels. Within minutes, the Xerilian attackers were disabled or destroyed. The Council ship, its hull breached in multiple places, drifted in space. "Open a channel," Daniel ordered. On the view screen, a stunned alien face appeared. Daniel recognized the species a Tellarite, one of the founding Council races. "This is Commander Daniel Wright of the Solar Imperium. We've been watching from the shadows long enough. It's time humanity returned to the galaxy." The damaged Council ship drifted in space, surrounded by the wreckage of Xerilian vessels. Commander Daniel Wright ordered a boarding party to assist the survivors. He led the team himself, stepping onto an alien vessel for the first time in human history since the exile. The air inside was breathable but had a sweet, unfamiliar scent. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the damaged corridors. They found the Tellarite counselor in the ship's medical bay, being treated for minor injuries. The alien's eyes widened in shock when Daniel removed his helmet, revealing his human features. "Impossible," the Tellarite whispered. "Your kind was contained." "Times change, Counselor," Daniel replied. "So do barriers?" "I am Commander Wright of the Solar Imperium, formerly known as Humanity." The Tellarite, who introduced himself as Counselor Zalara, seemed to age before Daniel's eyes. "After all these years, you return at our moment of greatest weakness. Is it revenge you seek?" Daniel shook his head. "We've been observing the galaxy for months. We know the Xerilian Empire has conquered much of Council space. We're not here for revenge. We're here to offer an alliance." Zalara laughed bitterly. "Alliance? With the species we exiled? Why would you help those who imprisoned you?" "Because the enemy of my enemy can be my friend," Daniel said. "And because humanity has changed during our isolation. We return not as the scattered worlds you once knew, but as the Solar Imperium, united and technologically advanced." Zalara studied Daniel's face. "You saved my ship when you could have watched it be destroyed. Perhaps there is room for discussion." Daniel's stealth fleet escorted the Council vessel to a secure location. Meanwhile, Eric Morgan sent an encrypted message back through the barrier, informing the Solar Imperium of their first contact and requesting instructions. The response came quickly. Admiral Susan Hayes would lead the main Imperial battle fleet through the barrier. The time for hiding was over. 3 weeks later, sensors detected a massive energy surge at the barrier's edge. Zalara, who had been in continuous communication with the remaining Council members, watched in awe as the barrier rippled and over 200 ships emerged. Each vessel bore the mark of the Solar Imperium, a stylized sun with rays extending outward like a corona. "By the stars," Zalara whispered. "Your fleet is larger than the combined forces of the remaining Council worlds." Admiral Hayes transferred to Daniel's ship for a direct meeting with the Counselor. She entered the conference room in full Imperial uniform, the gold and black colors of the Imperium gleaming under the lights. "Counselor Zalara," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I am Admiral Susan Hayes, Commander of the Imperial First Fleet." Zalara took her hand hesitantly. "Your return is unexpected, but timely it seems," Hayes replied. "Commander Wright tells me the Xerilians are on the verge of conquering the last free Council worlds. They attack Rigel within the week." Zalara confirmed. "Without assistance, it will fall like the others." Hayes nodded. "Then we have little time. I propose an immediate alliance between the Solar Imperium and the remaining Council races. We will provide military support against the Xerilians, in exchange for recognition of our sovereignty and rights to the territories we liberate." Zalara seemed overwhelmed by the directness of the proposal. "I must consult with the other counselors." "Of course," Hayes agreed. "But the Xerilians will not wait." While Zalara communicated with the Council remnant, Hayes prepared her fleet. The ships of the Imperium had been built for this moment, equipped with weapons and defenses developed during a century of focused military research. Phase shift technology had been incorporated into their tactical systems, allowing them to partially shift out of normal space during battle, making them difficult targets. Ambassador Olivia Clark arrived with the second wave of Imperial ships. As the Imperium's chief diplomat, she had studied historical records of alien negotiations extensively. Now she worked with Counselor Zalara to draft what would be called the Liberation Accord. "Your proposal is surprisingly generous," Zalara admitted as they reviewed the terms. "I expected demands for reparations for the exile," Olivia smiled. "The exile is ancient history to us now, Counselor. We're more concerned with the future than the past. The Imperium needs allies in this changed galaxy, not subjects or debtors." 2 days later, representatives from the 5 remaining Free Council races arrived at the fleet's position. They signed the Liberation Accord with the Solar Imperium, formally ending humanity's exile and establishing a military alliance against the Xyrillian Empire. Admiral Hayes wasted no time. "The Xyrillians expect to attack a weakened enemy at Rigel. Instead, they'll face the combined forces of the Council and the Imperium. We'll show them exactly what humanity has become during our absence." The Imperial fleet moved toward Rigel, joined by the remaining Council warships. Together they prepared to intercept the Xyrillian attack force. General Frank Peters coordinated with Council military leaders, integrating their tactics with Imperial strategy. "Your ships are unlike anything we've seen," a Council commander noted during a planning session. "The phase shift technology alone gives you a significant advantage." "Necessity forced innovation," General Peters explained. "When you can't expand outward, you turn your focus inward." Every resource in our solar system was directed toward advancement. The Xyrillian fleet appeared at the edge of the Rigel system right on schedule. 40 warships, each bristling with weapons, approached the planet with confidence. Their scanners detected the Council Defense Force, but the Imperial ships remained hidden, their phase shift technology masking their presence. "Let them commit to the attack," Admiral Hayes ordered. "Then we reveal ourselves." The Xyrillian commander, believing they faced only a token resistance, ordered a standard attack formation. Their vessels spread out, preparing to overwhelm the seemingly outmatched Council ships. Then Admiral Hayes gave the signal. The Imperial fleet shifted fully into normal space, appearing behind and around the Xyrillian formation. The enemy commander had only moments to realize they had been trapped before. Hayes ordered the attack. Imperial weapons fire tore through Xyrillian shields. Phase-shifting fighters darted between the larger enemy vessels, appearing and disappearing as they struck critical systems. Council ships, following the plan developed by General Peters, focused on containing the Xyrillians, preventing their escape. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Hayes watched the battle unfold. "Status report," she ordered. "Xyrillian fleet at 60% capacity and falling," came the response. "Our losses minimal. Phase shift systems performing above expectations." The Xyrillian commander attempted to regroup, ordering his remaining ships into a defensive sphere. It was a textbook maneuver against conventional attackers, but useless against the phase-shifting Imperial vessels. Hayes ordered her ships to increase their shift frequency, making them even harder to target. 3 hours after the battle began, the last Xyrillian warship surrendered. The combined Imperial and Council forces had achieved a decisive victory. News of the battle spread quickly through subspace communications. The seemingly unstoppable Xyrillian advance had been halted by the return of a species long thought contained. Counselor Zalara joined Admiral Hayes on her flagship to witness the aftermath. "This victory will change everything," he said. "The conquered worlds will hear of it. Hope will spread," Hayes nodded. "This is just the beginning. The Imperium has returned to the galaxy, Counselor. The exile is over. Now we liberate those who have suffered under Xyrillian rule, and we take our place among the stars." News of the victory at Rigel spread across the galaxy. On conquered worlds, people whispered of the return of humans, now calling themselves the Solar Imperium. The Xyrillians rushed to strengthen their defenses, but it was too late. The momentum had shifted. For the first time in decades, the Xyrillian Empire faced an enemy that could match and exceed their military might, Emperor. Alan Foster watched the battle reports from his chambers on Earth. Now, in his 80s, he had lived his entire life under the shadow of exile. His father had told him stories of the stars when he was a child. Now humanity had returned to those stars as conquerors. The liberation of Proxima is complete, his aide reported. General Peters reports minimal casualties. 3 more systems have risen in revolt against Xyrillian rule upon hearing of our arrival. Alan nodded. And the Council worlds? All 5 remaining Council homeworlds are now secure. Councillor Zalara has proposed moving the Council headquarters to a more central location with Imperial protection. 6 months after the Battle of Rigel, the tide of war had turned dramatically. The Solar Imperium, with its advanced technology and phase-shift tactical advantages, had proven nearly unstoppable. The Council races, reinvigorated by their new allies, had reclaimed many of their lost territories. The Xyrillian Empire was in retreat, abandoning outer systems to defend their core worlds. Admiral Susan Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, reviewing the latest tactical displays. The war had been swift and decisive. Imperial forces had liberated 23 systems. Each victory strengthened their position as liberated worlds pledged resources and troops to the cause. The Xyrillians have fallen back to these 5 systems, she explained to her officers, highlighting areas on the star map. They're consolidating their forces for a final stand. Commander Daniel Wright, now promoted to captain, studied the map. Their homeworld remains heavily defended. They've recalled their fleets from all but the most essential positions. Admiral Hayes nodded, which gives us an opportunity. Our intelligence suggests the location of the Xyrillian homeworld is here, in the Deneb sector. Previously, it was too well hidden and protected to approach. Now, with their forces stretched thin, we have a chance to end this war decisively. Director Patricia Lawson's intelligence operatives had infiltrated Xyrillian command structures during the months of conflict. Their reports confirmed that the Xyrillian leadership, including the direct descendants of those who had exiled humanity, had retreated to their homeworld. Among them was Vexnar VII, great-grandson of the original Councillor Vexnar who had led the vote for humanity's exile. Emperor Alan Foster insisted on joining the final assault. Despite concerns for his safety, he traveled to Admiral Hayes' flagship, as the Imperial fleet prepared for its most ambitious operation yet. I was a child when the barrier went up, he told Hayes. I remember looking at the stars with my father, wondering if we would ever walk among them again. I need to see this through to the end. The assault on the Xyrillian homeworld began with a massive phase shift jump that brought the entire Imperial fleet directly into the heart of their defense network. The Xyrillians had prepared for a conventional attack, with layers of defenses designed to slow an approaching enemy. They were not prepared for 200 warships appearing. Simultaneously, throughout their system, the battle was fierce but one-sided. Xyrillian ships fought bravely, but their technology was no match for the Imperial phase-shift weapons. Within hours, the space around the Xyrillian homeworld was under Imperial control. Ground forces led by General Peters secured key installations. On the planet surface in the Xyrillian capital, the Council of Elders gathered in their ancient chamber. Vexnar VII, wearing the traditional blue robes of his position, addressed his fellow leaders. The humans were contained for a reason, he reminded them. They were deemed too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed free travel among the stars. Now they return, proving our ancestors correct in their assessment. An aide rushed into the chamber, his scales pale with fear. Imperial forces have breached the outer defenses. They will reach the capital within the hour. Vexnar VII stood tall. Then we will face them with dignity. The Xyrillian Empire may fall, but our people will endure. Emperor Alan Foster, accompanied by Admiral Hayes and Captain Wright, entered the Xyrillian capital under heavy guard. The streets were eerily quiet, the population having fled or hidden in their homes. Imperial soldiers secured each intersection. Ensuring the safety of their leaders. In the council chamber, Vexnar 7 and the remaining elders waited. They had refused evacuation, choosing to face the consequences of their defeat. When the doors opened and Emperor Foster entered, Vexnar rose to his feet. "So the exiles return?" he said. "Have you come to exact your revenge, human?" Alan Foster walked slowly across the chamber, his age evident in his careful movements. He stopped before Vexnar, studying the alien's features. "You look like him," Alan said quietly, "your ancestor. I saw his image many times during my life. He was the face of our exile." "And now you are the face of our defeat," Vexnar replied. "Will you destroy our world as we can find yours?" Alan smiled. "No, that was never our intention. The Solar Imperium does not seek vengeance, Vexnar 7. We seek justice and a new order in the galaxy." Admiral Hayes stepped forward, placing a data tablet on the table before the Xerillian elders. "These are our terms. The Xerillian Empire will be dissolved. All conquered worlds will be freed. Your military will be limited to defensive capabilities only. But your people will retain their homeworld and their culture." Vexnar looked surprised. "You offer mercy when you could deliver extinction. The very trait your ancestors feared in us, our unpredictability, now works in your favor," Alan said. "We choose a path they would not have expected, mercy instead of vengeance. Cooperation instead of domination." In the following weeks, the terms of surrender were finalized. The Xerillian Empire collapsed, its conquered worlds liberated and returned to independence or council protection. The Solar Imperium established itself as the dominant power in the galaxy, but true to Alan Foster's word, they ruled as protectors, rather than conquerors. 1 month after the fall of the Xerillian capital, representatives from across the galaxy gathered at a newly constructed space station at the edge of the Sol system. There, where the barrier had once stood, they signed a new galactic charter. The Solar Imperium and the reformed Galactic Council would share authority, ensuring peace and cooperation among all species. As a symbolic gesture, the last remnants of the barrier were dismantled. Ships freely traveled between Sol and the wider galaxy for the first time in over 150 years. Catherine Palmer, the imperial historian, documented the moment for future generations. "Today marks not just the end of humanity's exile," she wrote, "but the beginning of a new era. The species that was once feared and confined has returned not as the savage conquerors that were predicted, but as the architects of a more just and unified galaxy. The Solar Imperium, forged in isolation, now stands as the cornerstone of galactic peace." Emperor Alan Foster watched from the observation deck as the final barrier generators were shut down. The stars seemed brighter somehow, more welcoming. He thought of his father, who had looked up at those same stars so many years ago and promised that humans would someday return to them. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "We returned to the stars? Not just as visitors, but as an empire."